with the delete project function. So let's get started. It delete project. And then let's look at what it should do. All right, so it's going to pass in a project ID and the request, so that way we can get the user ID. And it's going to call project service delete project. And it looks like it's going to find the project and then delete the project. And that's going to give us like our delete object. Delete response. I don't really remember what it's called, so we'll have to look that up. Okay, so should delete a project and return the response from the project repository. Async. All right, so the first thing that we'll look at is that we're going to have a project ID, and let's just say 1. And then we're going to have a request, which is going to contain a user, which is going to contain a sub. All right. The next thing that we'll look at is the delete response, which is an object, and then as something, something I don't remember. So let's look for delete in here. Delete result. And then let's head back over here, and this is going to be delete results. All right. So now we are going to have to do the mocking, right? So service dot delete project dot mock result value, and we're going to do the delete response. Now we can actually call the function we want to test. So await controller dot delete project, and then we will pass in the project ID and the rec. Now, okay, it's mad. Now we expect that the results is going to equal the delete result. All right, so let's see where we went wrong. I think we need another one like that. Perfect. All right, so let's run our tests and see how we did. Perfect. All right, so now we expect that service dot delete project, we expect it to have been called, and we expect service dot delete project to have been called with, and then we are going to take a look. It's been called with the project ID and the rec.user.sub. All right, let's go ahead and run the tests. Perfect. And we can move on now. Minimize this guy and go on to create feature. All right. So we're creating a feature. Let's go ahead and take a look at how this works, and then we're going to return a project. Okay, so I'm actually going to copy this create project test that we have, and then I'm going to paste it down here, and I'm going to edit it so it makes sense for create feature. All right, so should create a user a feature within a specified project and return, what are we returning? If projects create feature, and then return the updated project. All right, So let's take a look. So we are going to have const feature DTO, which is going to be of type feature. DTO. So then name is going to be feature1 and feature1 description. Let's scroll up and make sure that that fits. And then we also need our project ID, which is going to be 1. Perfect. Let's scroll back down. All right, the next thing we are going to need is the request. Perfect. And then we have projects, and within projects now, we will have a feature where the ID will be 1, the name will be feature1. Oh, but we don't want all the projects, we just want the specific project, so we don't need this, and this won't be. All right, then let's also take a look as if this is going to be get project by ID, and yes, it will be with statuses. So then here we will have status still going to be to do. All right, and then comma, feature name. Now let's do description is going to be F1 description. And then we can do user stories. It's going to be an empty array. So let's look at then this add statuses and see what we will have. Feature, we'll have user story count, and that's going to be 0. And then we're going to have completed user stories is also going to be 0. All right, and then so now we are going to mock the resolved value of the create feature function, which should be project. All right, so now we can call the controller create feature function, and we'll pass in the feature DTO and the request. Then we expect the result to be project. We expect service dot create feature to have been called, and we expect it to have been called with feature DTO.name, feature DTO.description, rec.user.sub, and then feature DTO.project ID. All right, let's run the test and see how we do. Perfect. So that was our create feature. All right, the next one that we are going to do is update feature. So I am once again going to copy update project, paste it in there, and then let's go ahead and edit it to make it make sense. So update feature is going to send in a field value, the user ID and feature ID, and then it is going to get the project, it's going to update the project, and then it's going to return the project by ID with the statuses. Okay. So we'll do name, and we'll do, instead of project 1 edited, we'll do feature 1 edited, project ID 1. I'm going to go to create feature, and I'm going to steal this project here because it should match what we want. And I'm going to say project with status just to make it easy. So then this should be feature 1 dash edited. All right, so we want to mock the resolved value from update feature. Then we will call update feature. This needs to be changed to update feature DTO. I think we need to import that type. Looks like feature ID. All right, so then this is going to be update feature DTO. So we expect the result to be project with status. We expect update feature in the service to be called and to be called with and then this should be feature ID. All right, let's run this and give it a try and see how we go. Perfect. And that is going to be our update feature function. Let's minimize and keep going. So now we have delete feature. All right, so I'm going to copy delete project and see if we can edit it to make sense with feature. So we don't have to retype everything. And let's look at what this does. So it's going to do a feature ID and a request. It's going to go ahead and get the project ID, and then it's going to get an updated project. Okay, so that means then we should be able to copy this project with status. Because we're not actually getting a delete result, we're going to get the project with status, and then this will be deleted. All right, so what are we passing in? We're passing in a feature ID, which is going to be 1, and then we're passing in the rec, so that makes sense. Then we're going to get a project with status back. Okay, so we are going to be mocking delete feature, and we'll mock the resolved value to be project with status. And then we expect we're going to call delete feature, and we're going to call that with feature ID and rec. We expect the results is going to be equal to project with status, and then we expect that the service dot delete feature method has been called and has been called with the feature ID and the user ID. All right, let's run it and see how we do. Perfect. All right, we can move on then. So now we're going to have our user story. Okay, so we can get rid of create user story, update user story, delete user story. All right, I think we should hopefully be able to use a lot of this create, update, and delete feature from here, but let's see. Okay, so create user story. Let's take a look. All right, so we're going to pass in a user story DTO. So let's change this, which should be of type user story DTO, and it should be name user story 1, and then description user story 1 description, and then we should also be passing in a project ID 1 and a feature ID 1. Okay, so it should create a user story within a specified project and feature and return the updated project. Believe that's correct. Yeah. All right. So we have this, the updated project then should have a user story in it. So we should have ID is going to be 1, name is going to be equal to user story 1. Description is going to be equal to US1 description. And then we should have tasks, which is going to be an empty array. So then we would have task count should be 0, and then completed tasks should be 0. Okay, that looks good. So now we are going to be doing service.createUserStory.mock resolved value should be project. All right, then we should be calling the create user story method, and we would pass in the user story DTO and the request. We expect the result to equal project. And we expect that the service create user story method has been called, and it's been called with, I think I'm just gonna retype this. Our user story DTO.name, our user story DTO.description, our rec.user.sub, our user story DTO.project ID, and our user story DTO.feature ID. All right, let's run this and see how we do. We have a typo here where we wrote DTO twice, so let's try again. Perfect, and we passed. All right, let's go ahead and move on to then delete user story. So we are going to be doing delete user story. All right, let's take a look at what, and this should be not delete user story. This should be update user story. So let's copy update feature. So update user story. All right, so let's take a look. So we're passing in a field and value, and then user story ID. We are going to get the project ID, and we're going to end up getting a project ID at the end. All right, so update user story DTO. Okay, should update a field on a user story and return the updated project with statuses. And it looks like this should be feature. All right, so then this would be update user story DTO. Field name, let's do user story 1 edited, and then let's say user story ID 1. I am going to actually copy the project from here because that will have a user story in it. And instead we are going to write dash edited. I'm going to call this project with status, so I don't have to change those down there. And that looks pretty good to me so far. All right, so then we want to actually call or mock the result value for update user story, and we want that to be project with status. Then we want to call the update user story controller function, and we want to pass in the update user story DTO and the request. We expect the result to be the project with the status. We expect that update the service update user story method's been called and has been called with, and then I'm just gonna retype this out. Oh, I'm in service. Update user story .dto .fields, update user story DTO .value, rec.user .sub, and then update user story .user story ID. All right, let's rerun it. Perfect, and we are doing pretty good. All right, let's try to do one more in here. Let's try to throw in our delete user story, and honestly, we're pretty close to being done writing all of our tests. All right, so I'm going to copy delete feature, and I'm going to change this name to delete user story. Should delete a user story, and this should say should delete a feature and return the updated project. And then I'll copy this, and it should return the updated project. All right, now let's take a look. So we are passing in a user story ID. We have a request, and then let's go ahead and take this guy here and let's put him here. So now we're deleting the user story, so this should be deleted. Also for readability, I just noticed we should have this edited here too. So you can see that the user story count is 0, but it should be 1. All right, let's go up and see if that, yeah, so we should have user story count 1. Doesn't really matter in terms of like whether or not it'll work, but it's nice for readability. Okay, so we are going to mock the delete user story resolve value to be project with status. Then we will go ahead and call the controller delete user story function, and we will pass in the user story ID and the request. We expect the result to be project with status, and then we expect that service dot delete user story has been called and has been called with the user story ID and the user ID, which is the request.user.sub. Perfect, and we passed. All right, we will pause here and we will move on to our tasks workflow in the next video. Thanks for watching.